Welcome. This is Uwe Brandis, Faculty Director of the Global Cities Initiative here at Georgetown. And welcome to this case study segment as part of the Urban Thinkers Campus. And we're here with Leona Agouridis, who's the President and CEO of the Golden Triangle Business Improvement District here in Washington, D.C. Leona, welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're just going to have a conversation exploring the professional practices associated with the Golden Triangle as part of this overall Urban Thinkers Campus conference. And why don't you, let's start with just the basics. Could you explain to us, just the basics about the Golden Triangle
Sure.
Business Improvement District?
Sure. Our organization is a place management organization. I don't know how much your listeners know about business improvement districts, but they exist in many of them, most of them in the United States, but throughout countries throughout the world. And our job is to make places amazing, to support the economic vitality of those places. And we're generally created by laws of the jurisdiction where we exist, and we are generally funded by a tax assessment on the buildings in that area. Each bid, it kind of molds itself to the neighborhood that it's in and the needs of that neighborhood. In our case, we exist in Washington, D.C., adjacent to the White House. Our southernmost border is Lafayette Park and the White House. We proceed northward to an area called DuPont Circle, which is one of the most iconic public places in the nation's capital here in the District of Columbia, and West Washington Circle. So our geography is about 169 block faces. It is a very densely populated area, 34 million square feet of office space. And in our case, we focus on the most fundamental elements of creating a great place, which are making sure that that place is clean and safe for visitors and for workers and residents. And then we activate the place through events so that people who are not workers or tourists have another reason to come to our neighborhood. And then finally, we work on large transformational projects. And so we have been very instrumental in changing the way many of our streets look and feel to visitors. So.
That's great. And I always think, also for many of our viewers here, they're very familiar with the World Bank building. Mm-hmm. So the World Bank is within
the World Bank, the IMF, the IFC, and the EU are right in the Golden Triangle.
That's great. Yeah. That's great. So what I'd like to, well then maybe just quickly, could you just explain a little bit more about the governance of the organization?
Yeah.
How are you organized? And who are your primary stakeholders?
So as I indicated, we're created by law. We are funded by a tax assessment on the buildings. And so the really interesting thing, and I think it'd be very interesting for your viewers, is that the owners of the buildings in this geography all agreed by petition that they would pay this additional, what amounts to a property tax on their building so that they could have direct services and have a direct say in the services. And so you have the government existing on one level, but then underneath that level, you have a very focused organization like ours that is ensuring that every day that the trash gets picked up, that somebody is looking at crime trends, that all of these essentials, somebody is planting, and watering the plants for the streets and the parks.
And so, in a way, you are an intermediary between the public and private sector?
We are absolutely an intermediary between the public and private sector. We work with both, but we are in a way neither. I and the great majority of my staff have had some experience in government, and we have had some experience in private sector. And it's really interesting to be able to be in that middle, because we do exist for the public good. We do, but we can see both perspectives, and we can translate those perspectives, and we can make things happen that nobody else can because of that unique perspective in the middle. You know, the government wants this and thinks this, the owners want this and think this. Where is there an intersection, and how do we then leverage that intersection to kind of find compromise or to find something that neither side alone could do?
And this intersection, which is where your place management organization lives and is responsible for those different issues that are a nexus between public and private. That's exactly what we're exploring. So let's dive deeper now into three questions, and we'll go through these one by one. First is really about data and information. Where are you getting the information with which you advance your mission? The second question then will be about how are you actually using this kind of information? And I know you get data and information from many, many different sources, but kind of like how are you managing your activities on the basis of this? And then we'll end on a more mission basis of how are you using this to advance your mission and to broaden your mission. So let's start with kind of, you know, when you sit down every week and you're solving a lot of problems, where are you getting the information from that you're using to make decisions?
All right, well, we use information like every minute, quite frankly, right? Yeah. And we use it for a variety of purposes. The first category, I think, is for management purposes. Then there are for marketing purposes, and then I think for planning purposes. For management purposes, we're always collecting data, and we have a team of people, for example, who clean, and so as they empty the trash can, you know, that gets acknowledged. They in real time that trash can has been cleaned. As they remove graffiti, how many bags of trash did they take to the refuse section? How many light poles did they paint? Things like that. And so that data, for example, is used. We look at the trends to kind of see, is performance falling off? Is performance okay? Are we seeing an increase in graffiti? What is driving that? What are the factors? How can we change that? That's one element in our cleaning program. We have a homeless outreach program that helps people get into housing or into services and off the streets. In that case, you know, how many people are we servicing? Again, how's our performance? Are we being successful in, getting them whatever services that they need? How many people are we getting into housing? And we look at at that data, and in that, are there mental health emergencies that occur? And so, and to give you an example, we've been able to see increases in mental health emergencies, and so that tells us that we have to get to the District of Columbia government to get services on the street and to get a quicker deployment. We've seen a decrease in the housing placements, and so we've gotten deeper into this, and it's because it's not for lack of vouchers, but it's for lack of housing supply on the district's end. So there are cases just in day-to-day management of our most fundamental mission where data is extremely useful and where we use it in real time to improve our delivery of services. For marketing purposes, quite frankly, a large part of our mission, especially since the pandemic, is to attract businesses, retail businesses, office businesses, new sectors of growth to the neighborhood. And so what can we do to position the neighborhood by using data? In that case, there are external sources. The sources that I talked to that were management sources, they were internal sources that we generated ourselves by use of our own, our own technology and our own data. In this particular cases, we'll pull from a lot of things. We'll pull from real estate studies, we'll pull from CoStar, a number of different sources to paint the picture of the amazing, for example, educational level of the talent, the number of nearby residents that are here, the transit accessibility, and the other things that make it a desirable neighborhood. And then finally, there's this other part of the way what we use data, and that is for planning purposes. And now we are in a post-pandemic environment, and we're trying to recreate the downtown, because the nature of downtowns, not only here, but throughout the country and throughout the world is different, right? And than it had been in 2018 or 2019. And so what are we planning? Where are the opportunities for buildings to be converted from an office to a residence? Where are the buildings that are quite old that might need to be replaced, and is there an opportunity to reframe? And that's one of the cases where we look at external sources, we work with the owners of the buildings to understand it better, and then we translate, as I earlier indicated, that we exist kind of between the government and the private sector and the building ownership, and so we translate that to the government, because from having worked in the government, I understand that they operate at a very macro level, right? Because they have
Right.
a very broad mission against a broad geography, and ours is more focused. And what we're able to bring to the table is some very unique knowledge for the government so that they can understand where the opportunities are, because we're all together in mission that we want a much better downtown and a much better city.
Yeah, and this is the power of your
Yes.
organization, right? You are advocating and engaged in a very particular geography. It's a place.
Yes.
It's a place with specific stakeholders and specific challenges, and that's the purpose and value that your organization brings. You've already started to talk about this, but I do want to explore this broader issue of performance management. And, historically, we haven't really thought about cities or neighborhoods or urban districts in a kind of performance way. And some people will think about performance management as really being like a kind of a corporate business practice. And so I'm just curious, how you are working not only to make data-informed decisions, but to really kind of look over time and explore ways to innovate your practices on the basis of all of this data that you're collecting.
So it feeds into your day-to-day performance, but it also helps you think about what does the neighborhood need, and how do you make it better. For example, we spend an awful lot of time. There's a very vibrant nightlife in our neighborhood. In fact, based on our pedestrian counts, which we do to collect data on how many people are walking on the street, even before the pandemic, we would have more people going to nightclubs on a Saturday at 2 a.m. than coming out of a metro system at the peak of rush hour. And we, just to put this into perspective, we have 90,000 people who used to be coming to work every day. So that shows you the vibrancy of the nightclub area. But when you have that many people in an area, then it starts to raise, questions about, policing and cleaning and other elements of public safety. And so we use a vehicle called Placer AI, which collects data from cell phones and aggregates it so that you can kind of look at trends and things like that. But we share that with the District of Columbia government, because the government has a lot of people coming to them and saying, there are a lot of people here at night, or a lot of things going on, but you can't they can't quantify it necessarily.
Right.
And our ability to be able to quantify that by something absolutely objective, which is and quantitative, which is a cell phone ping, really differentiates that conversation and takes it to another level. And this is one of the examples where the officials that we shared the data with, in a couple block triangle, in a 3-block triangle, and in the peak hour, we had 20,000 people on Halloween for that peak hour. And so they were so grateful to be able to get that, because it enables them to plan and deploy appropriately.
Right, and it's interesting because that example is very targeted and almost hour by hour over the course of a day.
It is.
But then you can take a step back and you have a track record of how the neighborhood has evolved over years, certainly months and years, and then even at this point decades even, of thinking about how this very finite part of the larger city has changed in very dramatic ways. Do you have any kind of reflections on that?
Yeah, I do. One of the things that we've placed a lot of emphasis on is sustainability and green infrastructure. And first, in the buildings themselves kind of saw it as a competitive advantage to be LEED certified. And any building that would have renovated after 2000 or 2000, 2010 particularly built up would up their LEED certification, from nothing to platinum, for example. And so we've seen that increase. But what we have done as a business improvement district, and because I started talking about how we look at the public environment, making the street desirable, and we started with greening it. And very soon after we started with greening, I've been there since 2006, we really started to green it with sustainable plantings, and we started to change the nature of the street by building rain gardens. And so we have constructed rain gardens through grants that we received with the government. They were competitively, we had to compete for these grants, but we've constructed rain gardens on 6 block faces along a street called 19th Street, which is one of our busiest streets in the area. And they're absolutely beautiful, because they have taken what was pavement and cement, and added beautiful, beautiful, beautiful green space, but while providing a way to mitigate stormwater. And we've had several large rain disasters, and we had a water main break on an adjacent street, and the rain gardens have just proven, they have really stood up to the challenges. We also have rain gardens in other neighborhoods, but just being able to kind of see the growth in that. We've done some plantings on 20th Street. We worked with the District of Columbia to remove pavement and create pollinator habitats along a couple of blocks of 20th Street on both sides. We've been increasing plants along a major corridor called Connecticut Avenue, with way too much vacant roadway in the middle. We constructed a small, like a 10-foot wide median that has plants and then does increase the pervious area for sustainability. So I think that's one of the places where you can really measure the progress.
Yeah, and it's amazing how you have a number of these very diverse activities underway all at the same time. one of the things that I think is quite extraordinary about the Golden Triangle is that you have not pursued these projects only in isolation, but you've woven them together to create an amazing place that people want to be at. So maybe that's the note we should end on, and that is, could you offer some additional reflections on how you've both diversified your overall goals for the neighborhood, but then also kind of brought them together in projects, and your activities also in the arena of public art and culture stand out across Washington. There are international best practices in how to use public art to activate different areas and to engage people walking down the street. But those aren't in isolation. You're doing that together with the stormwater initiatives and other climate change projects that you have underway. So how does it all come together, and how are you kind of becoming more complex even than how you started a few years ago?
I think the most important thing, there are two important points. One is that every neighborhood is different and everybody's going to do it differently. And you need to know your neighborhood. You need to be out there and on the street, and this is going to sound a little unusual, but you need to feel the street. You need to work with what the street is giving you, what it's telling you about its performance, and you need to kind of really visually think about how it can be better. So that's first. And then once you kind of know your neighborhood, you develop a strategic plan and a strategy. And that is where you can really step back and weave it all together and see it. And in fact, our strategic plan is a triangle. And at the base of the triangle is a very clean and safe neighborhood. And then once you have that, then it becomes then you work on making it an active neighborhood and an attractive neighborhood and one that you can get around in. And then at the next level is you make it aspirational and transformative. Now we are next to the White House, so we've got that to work with, right? This is next to the White House. This is a place where people come to change the world, right? And so once you have that, then it's easy. Then it becomes a management thing, and it becomes really kind of being sure that as you build a project, that the people who are going to maintain that project are sitting at the table so that they can clearly maintain that. I mean, you can build a rain garden, but who's going to take care of it, right? And so, and that would be our staff. So how do you make the decisions in the construction of it that make it, that facilitate maintenance? And then how do you sell it? Are there messages just in the design? How do you communicate that out to people? Can you communicate that out? Do you change it at all in order to communicate it out? But I do think, and I've been with this organization now for 17 years, and no day is the same, no day is boring, and I think that it's important to have long-term steady leadership and long-term steady employees, because it's so unique, and you need to know it in order to support it.
Leona, you just mentioned this, but I want to give you the opportunity to speak to an international audience here. What is your message to the world with respect to the Golden Triangle? Why should people around the world care about your neighborhood as opposed to any other?
I love this neighborhood. I love the fact that we are adjacent to the White House. I think Washington, D.C. is a local city, it's a national capital, and I think we are a global capital. And in my mind, my father's a Greek immigrant. I grew up Greek. We did not speak any English at home, and we have so much pride in being in this country, and I have so much pride in being in Washington, D.C., and in being able to take care of the neighborhood that touches the White House. And I know my father, if he were still with us, he would just be so proud of this.
That's great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us.